All right, everybody, welcome back to Cult Stuff and Chill. This is episode number 3, so not quite a month of doing this, but I feel like we're just getting better and better every week. Ashlee, I actually came prepared with a question for you this week.
Shoot.
Okay, so if you can only eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Popcorn.
Okay.
Like movie theater popcorn. You can do so much with popcorn. Like you can do caramel corn, you can do movie theater popcorn, candy corn.
So my coworkers brought this up this week, and I have been mulling it over all week, and I came up with the answer that I would have a chicken burrito from Chipotle with like all the fixings, because I feel like you could deconstruct that into like 800 different meals. And I don't know why I felt like I needed to know your opinion on this, but I was like, I need to ask her this
I feel
week.
like
It's very important to know.
I feel like yours is probably a better answer because that is probably more nutritious. But I just love popcorn, so
Yeah, I was thinking more like if I could have one thing for the rest of my life, it needs to be something that I can make into other things, because I would get so bored of eating the same thing. Now, that being said, if it was a chicken burrito from Chipotle, I would also have some really serious bowel issues, I'm just assuming, for the rest of my life. I don't know. I might get used to it after a while, but oh my god. But I do love a Chipotle burrito, so that's my answer.
and I would definitely probably die of heart disease within the year. But I mean, I'd have a ton of fiber in my diet.
Yeah, you'd be very regular.
Oh yeah. But
Okay.
the flavacol would probably kill me before.
Yeah, you'd have a heart
literally
attack
else.
for sure. Right, so I also, gosh, I came prepared with lots of stuff for you this week. So on the onset of this podcast, just for all of our listeners, I ordered us a little gift that was sort of supposed to be like the champagne bottle that we were going to smash on the side of the ship, metaphorically. It didn't come until this week, but you can go ahead and open your package.
Ooh.
And I've got mine sitting here with me as well. So it is for luck, money, and abundance. But if you open it, this is where the real party happens.
The real moneymaker. Ooh.
So, and I'm sure, Ashlee, you know all of this already, but I'm just going to explain this for our listeners. So, giving you guys a little close-up, this is what the candle looks like on the inside, if I can get it in frame. So, in there, that like shiny one, that is pyrite. So it's a stone, and it inspires creativity and brings a dash of sparkle. It encourages strength and leadership and invites you to step up to your own potential. And we also have green aventurine, which is known for prosperity and success and good luck. And then those little chips that are kind of like pink and red in color are sunstone, and those are allegedly said to put you on a path of self-empowerment. So I figured we could light our candles together while we podcast, and it would just be good luck and a way to hopefully usher in a little bit of success here.
Hell yeah.
And it's got a nice light scent too. So here we go, lighting it up. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not anyone that practices witchcraft. White candles, aren't they supposed to be good, like, cleansing energy as well?
Yeah, that, and they kind of take on, like, the property of whatever you want them to. They're like the very base. So, like, if you don't have any other color of candle, you can use white for pretty much anything. But yeah, it's usually, like, good, like, purifying, or, like, it helps to just amplify kind of, like, the spell that you're using. Not that I'm an expert in witchcraft either, but
You know a little bit more than I do, though, for sure. So hopefully that white candle's going to amplify our magic rocks here and bring us some good luck and success here with our podcast.
it's doubly good because as we're recording, it's actually full moon today, so.
Yeah, yep, my rocks are cleansing on the windowsill tonight. Oh, I should probably shout out this Etsy store too, in case anyone is actually listening and wants to buy these neat little candles. It's an Etsy store, like I just said. It's called the Enchanted Star Company, so check them out. They're very cute. The shipping took a little bit, but with Etsy, I feel like that's perfectly fine because everything is handmade, so like obviously it's going to take a little longer than ordering something off Amazon, so Shout out
And
to,
I'd rather,
I think her name was Sharon.
yeah, I'd rather support a small creator than Amazon.
That's not to say that I don't ball out on Amazon, but
Yeah. So my topic this week is about Aleister Crowley. So Aleister Crowley, Big Daddy Wizard, power bottom, very liberal king. He started his own witchcraft religion or cult. I guess he was more of an occultist than like a witch. The thing that it was based off of definitely turned into more witchcraft type stuff. So just to kind of start off with Aleister, he was born into a wealthy fundamentalist Christian family on October 12th in 1875 in Royal Leamington Spa, Warwickshire. His father was retired at an early age due to an inheritance from his family's brewing business, but because his dad was extremely religious, he like didn't support the business. He's like, I'm just gonna have this money and we'll use what we need. We're not going to go crazy or like spend a ton of money. He believed in living like well under his means. So eating very simply, like not traveling unless it was to like be a preacher. He like went around and traveled and preached their religion. And this dude, he was a good dude, I guess. He'd like read from the Bible every morning. So, I mean, he was chill. He was a fundy, but he was chill.
So I'm sorry, one more time, what's his last name?
Crowley.
Okay, so there's a show on Amazon Prime called Good Omens, and I wonder if, so there's this character that's like, he's basically like an harbinger of hell, but he's like kind of a good guy, but his name is Crowley. So I wonder if they named it after this guy, because he's very like into like the dark mystical arts, so I'm wondering if that's where they got that from.
Probably.
It's your pop culture reference of the day for you guys, if anyone knows what I'm talking about.
Probably. It's kind of become synonymous with like dark magic practitioner. This is kind of building up the background. Like his dad was a devout Christian, but his mom was like a zealot and crazy. So that kind of like influenced him later in life. That's why he's more of like a crazy magic practitioner. And she didn't really like Aleister. She only liked him when he was behaving, which is like he was a kid. So around the age of 8, he was sent to a boarding school where he encountered the Reverend Henry Darcy Champney, who he considered a sadist, which again is not necessarily important right now, but will later be important. At 11, Aleister's father died of tongue cancer, and Aleister just kind of like went off the rails. He got like really upset. He was like under the care of his mom, who was again a zealot, and so anytime he would even remotely misbehave, she'd like freak out. He started to get sick because of like all the stress was causing him to get sick. So he moved in with his uncle, who was like, let's have fun. He's like, let's play chess. Let's go mountaineering. Let's smoke some cigarettes. I'm not going to tell your mom. Around the age of 15, he's like, let's get some prostitutes. It was basically like the Edwardian version of like Make-A-Wish, because he was like, this kid's not going to live for very long.
Disney World's not around yet, so what else are they going to do? Going to a whorehouse is basically Disney World for a 15-year-old boy anyway, so.
For him at this point, he had all these experiences, and then he was like really looking into like his faith, and he's like, wait, the Bible says this, but it also says this. Like he's pointing out all these inconsistencies, basically just like pissing off the people that he was like going to school, like the teachers at his school. He was just like really out there just causing problems, and his mom was like, you're horrible, you're dreadful, like you're the beast from Revelations. And he was like, nice, like that.
Leans into it.
Yeah, just fully leans into it. And not only that, then he like gets pissed off, and he's like, you know what I'm gonna do to get back at you, because you called me the beast, and that you know, you shouldn't be doing that. He had sex with her maid on her bed, and then she's like kicked the maid out, fired her, and then like the maid ended up being a prostitute. And he was like, oh yeah, that was one of the girls that Jack the Ripper killed. And I don't know how true that is.
Is he still a teen at this point, like 15?
Yeah.
Oh my
he's
God,
still, like,
what a playboy.
Yeah, he's like just getting it, like a hellion from the very start.
Wow.
So he's a teen. He kind of lives with his mom. She bops him to boarding schools, and it's just a big back and forth around this time. In 1895, he changed his name to Aleister, because he's like, yeah, my name sucks. I don't really identify with it. I'm just going to change my name. Literally, that's how it went. and he went to Cambridge University originally for philosophy, but then he was a pretty good student, and he was like, yo, I want to study English literature because I really like poetry. And they're like, yeah, well, why not? Because it wasn't really a course of study at the time, stuff that you could study, but not like a major. He's doing his mountain climbing, he's doing his chess, which was big for him. At one point he considered a career in being a chess grandmaster or something. He's into literature, poetry. This is when he kind of gets into studying Western esotericism, which is just kind of like occult stuff. This is also when he came into his fortune from his father's passing. So this is when he really he starts going down on prostitutes, just spending dollar bills. He's at school, and he's like, you know what? I could be a chess grandmaster. I could be a diplomat. He studied Russian because he's like, oh, I might want to be a diplomat and go to Russia. But after some homosexual mystical experiences, he's like, you know what? I want to be a wizard.
Who doesn't?
So he's at school, he's studying this stuff. He's like, I want to be a wizard. And he's doesn't want to quite pull the trigger yet. And he also, while he's there, he's still banging prostitutes and, having affairs with women. But he also has a relationship with a boy, which is important for the sole fact that his name was Herbert Charles Pollitt. And he was actually a drag queen.
Oh my God. What a man ahead of his time. Wow.
Absolutely. And they dated, even though it was illegal in UK at the time. It was illegal to be a homosexual. You would either get chemically castrated, sent to prison, or both. Good old Herb was like, I can deal with the philandering, but I can't deal with you being a wizard. So he broke it off with him.
I like how that's where he draws the line.
He's like, yeah, the whores, they're fine. Being a wizard, I don't fuck with that. He's like, you know what? I'm just going to drop out of school, which he was actually doing well. So it was like, why? You could have just gotten a degree. But he's like, no, I'm going to drop out, become a wizard. So in August of 1898, he went to Switzerland. He met a dude who got him inducted into the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which, if that sounds familiar, it had members like Arthur Conan Doyle from last week. There was a lot of kind of famous people in it. And it's kind of like being a Freemason, but more witchy. But it's kind of like a social organization. Mm-hmm. We can go into it more later because there's a lot about it. But it's also the founding head for Wicca in current days, and some other kind of ritualistic witchcraft kind of organizations. Mm-hmm. And it's very much about ritual, about rules, about making sure that you're trying to keep people in line by giving them rules. Mm-hmm. Also, they allowed men and women on equal terms.
So, fun fact, I used to live just outside of DC. Ashlee, obviously, you know that. But I lived in Alexandria, which has this huge Masonic temple that you can go tour. And so I went and toured it because I think at one point Nicolas Cage went there in National Treasure. So that was pretty much the only reason I wanted to go. But they have this room in the upstairs of it that shows all the different basically outfits and costumes. There were women's versions. I don't know when they started allowing them, but basically the point I'm getting at is they basically dress like wizards. So the Freemasons are up to something for sure. They're doing witchcraft.
Oh, definitely. They can pretend it's just a fun social thing, but it's witchcraft.
Uh-huh. Well, and one of the, so I guess the women, they're kind of subsected, if that makes any sense. Is that a word? Yeah. I don't know. Into different, it's all part of the Freemasons, but they have their own little group, and it's something to do with the rainbow, rainbow sisters or something. So they're either doing witchcraft or they're all lesbians. I obviously haven't done the research on this. I could be totally off base, but there's something to do with the rainbow in one of those names. So I'll, maybe look it up and correct myself next week, or maybe not.
Or maybe just our viewers, if you're a Freemason, you can let us know. Mm-hmm. Because obviously, we don't know.
No, clearly.
And I get salty. I get salty whenever anything's either we're only going to allow, because that was one thing I saw about Freemasons is certain branches only let Christians in, or certain branches do you can be an atheist and that's fine, or you know, whatever god that you want, whatever higher being that you want. But like when they're like, no girls allowed, I'm like, okay, what kind of weird shit are you doing that you're scared of women being there? Like,
They're just
I don't
all
know.
sucking each other off or something. I think my uncle's a Freemason.
So yeah, Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. It's, you know, they're going to the cult, they're going to paranormal stuff. It's more witchy, I think, than the Freemasons, but I still think the Freemasons are Manwiches.
Mm-hmm.
That's where he met his mentor, George Cecil Jones, and the leader, Samuel Liddell McGregor Mathers. And so there's different levels to it. And so he was like brought in at the beginner level. Like, I think it's like neophyte or something. But he's like, this isn't enough for me. I am better than this. I'm smarter than all of you. Fuck this. So he basically like went to a dude and he's like, yeah, will you teach me the higher levels and I'll let you live with me for free? Because at this point, he's got some money from his dad's inheritance. So he's like, yeah, sure. And then, yeah, the guy went and lived with him, taught him some of the higher levels, the, you know, more esoteric knowledge. And they basically just did a bunch of drugs, and it was great for a while. But his tutor left to go study Buddhism. And Alistair's like, well, this scene's getting kind of stale. I'm going to move to Scotland, like just off the Loch Ness. And there he was like, I'm going to appropriate the shit out of this culture. So he's like wearing Highland clothes, and he like called himself the Laird of Boleskine, which was like the name of his estate. So he's like, you know what I need now? I need to take a sabbatical. So he like traveled around. He went to Mexico, Hong Kong, China, and India, and France, and just a bunch of different places. And he studied a bunch of different kinds of like mysticism, from like Enochian invocations, Shaivism, Freemasonry he studied. And he also did some like mountain climbing. He wrote some poetry, had sex with a whole bunch of people, did a lot of drugs, and contracted malaria and influenza. So after he kind of recovers from the malaria, and I think he actually got it twice that time. I could be wrong. But it seemed like he got malaria and then he went somewhere else and got malaria again. But eventually he makes his way back to Scotland. And when he gets there, he's like hanging out with one of his friends. And his friend's like, oh yeah, my sister's she's kind of in this arranged marriage. And Alistair's like, what? You're making your sister like be in an arranged marriage? No. So he marries the girl. He's like, I'm going to marry you. He's like, I'm going to marry you. We're going to do our own thing, you know, whatever. That way you don't have to marry this dude that you don't want to marry. And she's like, that sounds pretty cool. Mm-hmm. So he marries Rose Edith Kelly. That pissed off his friend, who's like, we're not friends anymore, dude. And then pisses off her family. But like Alistair and Rose, they don't care. They're fucking off to Cairo for their honeymoon. So while they're in Cairo, Alistair started trying to make contact with Egyptian deities because he's like, that's where it's at. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of in the heyday of like when people were eating mummies, you know, for like medicine.
Oof. This is like kind of a crazy time for me in pop culture, not pop culture, but in like society, because Not only do you have that Egyptology, yeah, but you have everyone going crazy, you know, for Egyptian deities, obviously, but you also have that spiritualism thing going on that we had talked about last week. So it's like, I feel like people are a little kooky back then.
Well, and it's just like perfectly acceptable. Like, it's kind of like witch talk now, where it's like, you can just be a witch and it's fine. Whereas, like, I feel like when we were kids, it was like you had to go places where it was safe.
Yeah, the neighbors would talk for sure.
Yeah, Alistair, Rose, they're in Cairo, and he claims they're doing all these rituals, and he claims that he made contact with Horus via his wife Rose. And it was like she went into like this trance, and then when she came out of it, she's like, yeah, I saw Horus and he talked to me. And Alistair's like, bitch, no. He's like, how come Horus hasn't talked to me? And she's like, it's because your ego's too big and he doesn't want to talk to you. And so Alistair's like, you know what? If you talk to Horus, then we're going to go to the museum and you're going to point him out and tell me who you talked to. She's like, fine. So they go to the museum. She goes to exhibit 666 and points out Horus on the Stela of Ankef Unkansu, or the Stela of Revealing. And so Alistair's like, oh my god, now he believes it. Because it was Horus. And she didn't really have any knowledge of this before. Like, I think she was educated, but she wasn't, like, educated about occult and, non-Christian deities. So Alistair and his wife, they're doing these rituals. He claims that during these rituals, he hears these disembodied voice calling itself Aiwass, which Alistair believed to be, like, a guardian angel or, like, the messenger of Horus or something. So Alistair starts writing down everything that this voice tells him to do. And so he writes it all down. He titles the book of the Law, which becomes later, like, one of the books of Thelema, which is Alistair's religion. Spoiler. So the book basically said that they were entering a new eon and that Alistair was a prophet and that he was detailing everything directly from the gods, blah, 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 blah. So he claims that the voices also told him to do crazy shit, like stealing the stele from the museum, like the thing that had Horus on it, and, like, taking it to a private island and, like, building a bunker, basically. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. It was like, you should live, like, kind of in solitude with your followers or whatever. And he's like, no, fuck that. The important takeaway that Alistair got from this was that the voice told him, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, which basically just means, like, do what you want. That's it. Use your best judgment. And Alistair, already, like, a libertine, was just like, yeah, that's it. That's the money shot. So they kind of finish up writing this book. They go back to Scotland, and there Rose gives birth to their first daughter, Lilith. Around this time, Alistair is progressing through the lower grades or levels of the Golden Dawn, but everybody hated him, like, in the thing. Because he was a bisexual king. He was doing tons of drugs. He wasn't trustworthy. Like, the first time he went to one of the meetings, he went in, like, a mustache and, like, a disguise and was like, yes, Jesus. I am from Russia, with, like, a terrible Russian accent. And they were just like, what the fuck?
Okay, I love this guy already.
I mean, he is. He's fun. They're like, he's not trustworthy because of that type of shit. And they're like, he's evil. Like, he's black magic. He is no good news type of man. So, like, when he comes back from Egypt and he's telling all his buddies, like, hey, like, I made contact with Aiwass, and he's telling me all this stuff from Horus, and they're like, dude, that's not an angel, that's a demon. And Alistair's like, fuck you. It doesn't matter. Like, it's telling me all this shit. He's like, let me prove this to you, whatever. And they're like, no. It's a demon. End of story. Fuck off. So they refuse to let him have access to the upper levels because of this. Like, they're like, no, you're not getting access. You're crazy. You're fucking around with demons. So he's like, fuck this. So him and his mistress at the time changed the locks on the lodge for the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And he's like, this is my lodge now. And the court, literally, it went to court. Like, they're like, dude, you don't pay the rent. You cannot take this building. So he's like, fine, I'm going to go start my own magic cult. So he left. He just fucked off.
Petty. Love it.
Petty king. Really, all of the stories about the Golden Dawn are, like, just a bunch of, like, people being petty as fuck.
Oh my God, I love it. It's really like an old-timey fraternity, for sure.
Yeah. But it's also kind of like YouTube drama where it's like everybody loves this person until they get canceled for this, and then everybody loves this person until they get canceled. And, you know, like for Arthur Conan Doyle, it was kind of like the whole Houdini thing. Like, I'm sure he would have been canceled for that. Like, you know, when he was talking about Houdini's mom. Alistair, he gets kicked out of the magic cult. Alistair became increasingly paranoid that Mathers was using magic against him and was just like, man, he's gonna get me. So he's back in Scotland. And I mean, he was like living in Scotland and traveling to these like events and stuff. He's like staying in Scotland. He took up work as a wizard. He gets in with this like Earl of something, I can't remember. It's not important. And this Earl was like, people are using bad magic against me. And Alistair's like, dude, you're just addicted to cocaine. So he's like, here, let's go on a trip. No coke for a while. And then we'll see if you still think that bad wizards are coming to get you. And so I guess that worked for him. He also took on some, like, magic students, including Victor Newberg, which would be, like, his closest follower, also lover, and introduced him to S&M. Alistair was definitely a power bottom, and he was into S&M, like, for most of his life. He started to have really only, like, heterosexual relationships later in life. I'm guessing because of all the drugs and everything that went on, his asshole probably prolapsed. Like, he's probably like, I gotta slow down on this. I don't have any proof of that. That is just my speculation. But, or he had hemorrhoids or something. You know, I get it.
Yeah.
You gotta slow down when you get older. He's fucking around with this Victor guy. Still married to Rose. He still thinks Mathers is out to get him. So he's like, I'm gonna go travel around again. So he's traveling around to different places. He wrote some smut. He wrote a lot of homoerotic stuff. Or just a lot of erotic fanfic, basically.
He's really a man of many talents.
He is. He also, like, is getting into opium at this point. He had a few affairs. He met up with Rose and Lilith, who were, I'm not sure if they were also traveling or they just, like, met him somewhere and then went back. But then his daughter actually died of typhoid while traveling, which he blamed on Rose, who is now an alcoholic. Because of the magic stuff, I think. And he blamed it on her alcoholism. He's like, if you weren't such a bad mother, but it's like, you had an easy out to blame, like, people throwing magic against you. Like, you easily could have been like, it was Mathers that sent sent a curse on my daughter to kill her. But no, he's just like, you're a bad mom.
All because her husband wants to be a power bottom and do magic.
Yeah. She deserved better, honestly. She would have been better off marrying the other dude.
A lot simpler life. I mean, definitely not as exciting, but...
Kind of rounding off Rose's story. So they have another kid named Lola Zaza in 1907. And Rose is just like, I don't love you anymore. The magic is getting to be too much. So they get a divorce in 1909. But she actually ends up being committed to an asylum for her alcoholism 2 years later and just kind of stays there, I think. She, like... And it kind of starts off this trail of, like, people who come into contact with Alistair, like, they just get burnt up by a celebrity. Because it happens to a lot of people, and I'm not going to go into detail about all of them because there's a lot. Like, he has a prolific sexual career, he does a lot of drugs, and, like, just burns up people because nobody can keep up with him.
Yeah.
But kind of going back a little bit, so back to 1907, Alistair hitched back up with his old mentor, George Cecil Jones. And basically, they just got stoned and did some magic. And
of course.
Wrote the Psychology of Hashish, which basically just said, like, smoking pot was the best way to meditate and do magic spells. He said that that's when he actually got back in touch with Aiwass, the angel or demon, depending on who you ask. So that's when Aiwass dictated the segments of the Holy Book of Thelema to Alistair, which is, like, his Bible, I guess. And that's when Alistair and George decided to start the new order, the Order of Thelema. And they started recruiting people to do all the rituals, which included lots of drugs and sex and doing whatever the hell you want, because that's what the rules are. There are no rules. And so he's traveling around trying to get these followers, and it took him to places like Moscow, where it's actually speculated he had gotten in with British intelligence to try to spy on, like, the revolutionaries in the area. He also went to Paris. He went to the U.S., where he got in trouble because that's around the time that World War I was starting. And Alistair's, like, supporting the German side during World War I, and people got, like, kind of pissed at him. And this whole time, he's just been living off of donations from, like, his followers, which, you know, at some point the money's going to run out. So he had to go back to England. In England, everyone was especially pissed about him supporting Germany. He was just like, fine, whatever, I don't give a shit. So he's there. He kind of develops a really bad problem with his asthma. And this is when he gets addicted to heroin because, of course, the doctor's like, you have asthma? Let's do heroin about it.
Seems like, you know, really the best way to treat that, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, he already has a drug problem, clearly.
Might as well just double down on it.
Yeah. The doctor's just like, all right, you know what? Yeah. Heroin. You can handle it, right?
Were they smoking or injecting it? Because it seems like if you were smoking heroin, maybe not the best for an asthmatic, but what do I know? I'm not a doctor, right?
I think it was all of the above.
Ah. Yikes, crispy treats.
He hooks up with a chick in Paris in his travels after he gets addicted to heroin, named Leah Hersig. And they have a daughter named Anne Poupée, is what they called her, Leah. So this is when shit starts to get really weird.
As if it's not weird enough already.
No, it gets really weird. And it gets kind of gross and sad. So around 1920, it's 1920 at this point, Alistair started the Abbey of Tolima in Italy. And it was like a commune. It had features such as a room painted with disturbing frescoes in which he would tell his followers to go take LSD and go sit and meditate in there. It was filthy, just disgusting, because nobody had to do anything, so nobody cleaned. More disturbing, people could bring their kids, and he was like, yeah, if the kids just want to run around naked, if they want to observe the sex rituals, that's fine, which is gross.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't, not that I'm defending this, because I don't think this is right, period, but it doesn't seem like it was as much of a, I want to see little kids naked. It seemed like he didn't really care for children. He just didn't give a shit. And he's like, if they're going to be here, they're going to live like everybody else.
Right.
They didn't take part in them. They could just watch the sex rituals, which is, it was fucked up regardless.
I mean, they didn't have Coco Melon back then, so what else are they going to watch, really?
Yeah. Are you going to give them LSD and put them in the nightmare room?
I mean, at least they're not going to work at the factories, so.
Yeah. I mean, they could have been working the factories.
Exactly.
I mean, Alistair was kind of problematic for a lot of reasons. He was kind of racist, too, and, would say kind of racist shit against Jewish people. But it was also, as I was doing research in this, people were like, yeah, he was just a man of the times, though. So it, just kind of further drives home the point that almost everyone from history was a shitty person. Just horrible. They're at this abbey. It's disgusting. His daughter, Poupée, died. They say because it was so gross. And then Leah had another daughter that they called Astarte Lulu Panthea. And, she left. She got, burnt out. I think she had, a mental breakdown. And then the abbey really started to go downhill. And it culminated with, a couple moving there where the husband, it was a wife and a husband. The husband, got a liver infection from being forced, well, not being forced, but Alistair's just go drink that creek water, it'll be fine. And it was polluted. And so the husband died from that, and the wife is like, I'm gonna go rat you out to the media. So she was telling them, and this is kind of a trigger warning because this is really bad. So she's like, I got really sick off of having to drink cat blood, and they were sacrificing animals there, and every time someone would use the pronoun I, they'd have to cut themselves with a razor. So this is kind of around the time that Mussolini is coming into power in Italy. And he's like, oh no, we don't play this witchcraft shit here. So they deport Alistair. The Abbey of Tolima just kind of goes under. I think it's still empty to this day.
Mm. That place has got to be haunted.
Oh yeah. Well, and it's that's another common theme with all of the buildings that Alistair lived in throughout his life was that they're profoundly haunted. They open up some bad shit in there.
Wow.
His house in Scotland, a lot of famous people have lived there, rock stars and stuff, and they're yeah, no, there's definitely Crowley's demons are here.
Wow.
Just detailing out how bad it is.
Low key want to visit.
Yeah. Well, and that's a whole episode on itself is just going over that house. Alistair gets deported. So he's trying to make money because he's full stop out of money at this point. He starts trying to sue people for libel, for copyright infringement. He wins some, he loses more. He moves around, he's couch hopping. He moves from lovers to followers, patrons, whoever will take him in basically. And eventually after one of his more publicized court cases, he gets hooked up with Deirdre McClellan, who's basically just a super fan. She's like, I want to have your baby. Which, a lot of women did. They're like,
Oof.
I want to have your baby. And, like, during his rituals, he'd have, like, his Scarlet Woman, who's, like, his head, I don't know, bang partner.
I mean, that's got to be the official title. I don't know what else it would be.
Super fan, Deidre. She was like, listen, I love you. I want to have your baby, but you got to get off the drugs. So she helps him get clean. And they end up having a son named Alistair Ataturk Crowley. You know, they're kind of living the family life. These are kind of like Alistair's golden years. This is around the time that World War II pops up. Side note about that, Alistair was originally interested in Hitler. He's like, oh, maybe we can convert him to Thelema, like, before he went full, like, extermination mode. But then there was, like, one of Alistair's buddies lived in Germany, and he got arrested by, like, the SS, and he's like, oh, wait, no, this guy is a black magic practitioner. And at this point, he's, like, kind of slowing down a little bit. He's off the drugs. He's not doing the crazy shit anymore. He kind of picks up some important disciples, like L. Ron Hubbard, which, if that sounds familiar, that's the guy who created Scientology.
Imagine that he is fucking entangled with some of these crazy-ass people.
And another one that's kind of interesting, Jack Parsons, who is a rocket engineer. Who I might do a story on him later because his story is kind of interesting as well. Mm-hmm. It kind of goes along the same vein. But basically, Crowley just kind of lives out his life with Deidre and little Ataturk. And he kind of becomes like a model father where he like didn't really seem interested in kids before. And he becomes a family man, and he ends up dying of chronic bronchitis in 1947. So that's kind of the story of Aleister Crowley.
Wow.
Fascinating. Definitely
what
fucked
a
up.
Man.
He was a mad lad. He was
For
like
sure.
I can't even think. I don't know what stereotype today he would be.
Well, he's definitely on 4chan, I can tell you that.
Oh yeah. He's definitely like 4chan Redditor, like going in deep state.
Oh, for sure.
But he was also like super liberal, so I think he probably would have fit in better with like today's world than he probably did then.
Mhm. Yeah, I think people are a little more like, obviously, as we've seen on Witch Talk, down with the magic and also, you know, bisexuality and all that stuff. So he probably would have done just fine.
Mhm. I'm surprised with as much as everybody kind of hated him, but he just kind of didn't give a fuck. He was like,
no.
But I'm surprised that he actually didn't get arrested for homosexuality in the UK, because like that was a big thing back then.
It sounds like he was being pretty brazen about it, but I wonder if because he was married to a woman, if that offered him some sort of like immunity to it. So he could be like, no, I'm married. Like, of course I'm not getting my tushy touched.
But yeah, so that's Aleister Crowley.
I'd love to hear, there's a couple people you referenced there that you said you could do a whole story in like the haunting of his house. I would love to hear that someday. So
yeah,
if
any of our viewers like to hear that, drop a comment below.
Because I know you love cannibals, I picked a story about cannibals, and I'm going to tell you about cannibalism. Have you ever heard of the Rottenburg cannibal?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, his name, and I apologize ahead of time to German listeners and or anyone that just knows I'm pronouncing these wrong. The names in this story are German, as well as the towns. I'm not going to pronounce them correctly, and I do apologize. I listened to how they were pronounced, and it was over my head, and I tried, and I forgot, so I'm sorry. Back to Rottenburg Cannibal. His name is actually Armin, I think it's Maivis, Armin Maivis, and he was born in, obviously, Germany, in a town called Kassel, and he, like many people that end up on our list of fucked up people, was a very lonely child, unfortunately. And his father was a big fat jerk, basically, who was just disinterested in his son. And he was actually only 8 when his family broke up, and then his father abandoned the entire family, never contacting them again. So very much the case here where his childhood just not ideal. And actually after his father left, it obviously fell on his mom to be the dominant parent, and she would often berate him in public and just like belittle him And she also insisted on accompanying him everywhere. So not only was she constantly with him, but she would, like, in public just very loudly berate him and tell him how stupid and worthless he was. To kind of cope with his lack of a father figure, he created an imaginary brother called Frankie. And it's actually to Frankie that he vented his first cannibalistic thoughts, because he would listen to him, which is something that his mother never offered him. So at the age of 12, he actually begins to fantasize about eating his friends, so that his friends would become part of him and stay with him forever, which is just a very desperate solution for him, because he was very lonely and just like a misunderstood child, basically. So then in 1999, his mom dies. He's an adult at this point. He actually is left the family's large mansion house in a town called Amstetten. Again, sorry, German listeners. Please feel free to correct. Basically, totally alone for the first time in his life at this point. And he's like, without his controlling mother, he constructed a shrine to her in the house, which seems very strange because she was, like, obviously not nice to him. But I guess everyone's got their own coping mechanisms, and he clearly had, like, a fucked up childhood, so who am I to judge how he's dealing with that, really? But again, completely just makes this big shrine to her in the house, and it's completed with a plastic mannequin that he says is his mother, and he would lay on a pillow each night and, like, put his mom to bed.
Side note, speaking of mannequins, that just gave me a vivid memory of one time when I was an intern at not a company I work at now. I had to go around and source 2 mannequins because the marketing manager just, like, wanted me to get him some mannequins.
For
I don't know.
Undisclosed reasons.
He was like, oh, well, we could, like, dress it up like the shows or something. So he basically just, like, sent me on this wild goose chase. And so they still have the mannequins because we borrowed them from a store that, like, no longer exists. So,
well, he probably has a shrine in that office somewhere to someone.
That's what that made me think of. I'm like, was this really for work, or was he just, like, trying to build a shrine?
I'm picturing, like, Helga Pataki. Did you ever watch Hey Arnold? Mm-hmm. So she had that shrine to Arnold in her closet. That's kind of what I'm picturing, only obviously his mom is not made of bubble gum. It's made of a plastic mannequin. So that's where my brain's going here. But that just kind of, like, sums up in a few paragraphs, like, how his life is and how he had, like, a shitty childhood. So, like, obviously we know he's going to end up a little bit fucked up, right?
Yeah. Well, so, not everyone that comes from a shitty childhood ends up fucked up, but in the context of this podcast,
right,
almost everyone we talk about is going to be kind of fucked up.
I've never heard a story about a murderer or, like, some sort of weird cult leader that didn't have, like, a traumatic event in their childhood that just, like, snowballed into some sort of, like, weird fetish for murder, and in this case, cannibalism.
I think there are a few where it was really just, like, we have no idea why this person is like this, but it's definitely not the norm. It's not the average. Like, it takes a very different, special kind of person to be like, I'm going to come from this normal ass household and then just be a serial killer.
I think those people are, like, the world's true psychopaths. Like, if you have a fucked up childhood, I think it's probably the trauma response that's causing you to be, like, a crazy person and do these fucked up things. But if you come from a totally normal family and you're just like, yes, I want to kill some people, I want to eat some people, you're probably just legitimately a psychopath.
Yeah. Well, and if it's not coming from a place of, like, mental, I mean, obviously to kill a bunch of people you have to have some sort of mental illness, but it's not like mismanagement of mental illness, which is still kind of, like, neglectful in a family sense. I would still kind of put it into that category, or, like, an addiction or something. Because, like, even I'm thinking about a few people, like, there was one case where, like, and we can go into this later, like, on a different podcast, but where, like, a guy killed his whole family because he had an online girlfriend. But, like, still that was, like, an addiction, and obviously, like, he wasn't in the right frame of mind, so I can't even classify that as, but just, like, having somebody come up and just be like, yeah, no, I'm gonna kill everyone.
Yeah. But speaking of addiction, so after his mother's death, he develops an addiction to internet pornography. So we're just going to keep snowballing, and his life is going to get weirder and weirder. And his, niche genres that he really enjoyed were ones that featured surprise, torture, and pain. And through these internet sites where he was getting all this, like, weird torture porn, he found his way to chat rooms about cannibalism. So his favorite site was a forum called the Cannibal Cafe. And it's a blog where people shared their interest in cannibalism. Now, a disclaimer on this site mentions that there is supposed to be a distinction here of fantasy versus reality. So, like, to my understanding, a lot of the posts on this site were very much like fanfic, like people that had this fantasy but didn't actually act on it. So they would just, like, write these fantasies down. They were actually going out and eating people.
Yeah.
So basically it's more of a role-playing situation than, like, Tinder for cannibals. And actually, like, upon research, there were a lot in the early 2000s, a lot of forums for things like cannibalism, which kind of shocks me. And I feel like if you went on the dark web now, you could probably find those again still. But they were just, like, early internet age, very just open access to people.
Yeah, I remember that age. It was like the way that the internet used to be for our viewers that maybe aren't as old as we are, I guess. Like, basically the web was the dark web, and you could pretty much find whatever you wanted, just open access. And then there came, like, a differentiation later, I would say probably, like, when we were in college, where it was like, okay, these sites are not going to be allowed. They went to the dark web. Yeah. It was very, like, closed access. Stuff that was relatively safe to view became the regular web.
And I would never do it on my own computer because I'm afraid that, like, there's... Obviously, our internet activity is monitored, like, just, we all know that, just based on the ads that you get every day. But I'm afraid to, like, actively seek out the dark web, even though I'm, like, so interested to know what's actually there. I know it's just going to be, like, stuff I don't want to see or hear. But I would like to experience it at some point.
I mean, it's a lot of stuff for sale. I think it might be closed down now, but there was, like, the Silk Road, which was, like, where you could buy weird shit. But, like, I remember, like, a genre of videos from maybe about 5 years ago, like, on YouTube, where it was people like, oh, I ordered this thing from the dark web mystery box. So.
Yeah. I watched one of those, and he ordered a mystery box from the dark web and ended up opening it. And in these packages were, like, body parts of a dead rabbit. Like, skinned animals.
That's just sad.
I know, yeah. So back to our friend Armin here and his Cannibal Cafe. So soon after he discovers this website, he begins placing advertisements looking for someone to volunteer themselves to be eaten, which is wild. But I guess if you're on this, like, fantasy fetish website, that's kind of the genre that you're looking for. And so in 2000, he posted a message saying that he's looking for a young, well-built man aged 18 to 30 to slaughter. And to this message, about 200 people, by his own estimate, found it intriguing and offered up their bodies. So he had to screen candidates for months because, like we said, it was very much like a role-playing website. So when people started realizing that maybe he wasn't just role-playing, obviously you could imagine it communicating with him becomes a lot less appealing when they are, like, actually facing the knife. Like, they don't actually want to die.
Yeah.
So the first man to actually meet up with him, his name is Borg Chose. Again, apologize for my pronunciation. I'm just going to call him Borg. So he was supposed to become Armin's first victim. However, while he was laid out on Armin's table, preparing to be butchered, he complained of feeling ill and asked to be released, and Armin obliged. So to his credit, he actually didn't force anyone to be slaughtered and eaten. So instead, he would talk to the people that responded, and if they backed out, he would respect their wishes. So yeah. I think a good takeaway to this is that if you're going to be a cannibal, at least be a polite one.
Yeah. Consent king.
Consent king. So he continues to frequent the forum. He's looking for victims until February 14th of 2001, when a man named Brunjurgen Bronze, I'm going to do this over every name in the story. I'm going to call him Bronze. I know that's not correct, but that's the easiest for my American brain to wrap around. So, again, February 14th, 2001, Bronze responds to him. He was a 43-year-old computer technician, so he wrote to Armin saying that he would agree to be eaten. And in fact, in his initial contact with him, he writes that he is 36 years old, he gives his height and his weight, and then he goes, I hope you're really serious about this because I really want it. Come to find out, like, obviously, if you're someone that's, like, wanting to kill yourself, you need help in more of a therapy way than he was reaching out for. So it turns out he had, like, a history of depression. He struggled with his sexuality. And so I think his way of coping with that was to offer himself up because he was having these fantasies. And he's like, well, if I'm going to kill myself, I might as well do it in a way that I'm going to get sexual gratification from. So he was, like, really on board with this idea of becoming a victim. And so they exchanged scandalous emails basically discussing the best way in which he could be eaten and the way that his body should be used afterwards. And he even goes far as to suggest that his skull should be used as an ashtray afterwards. So he's just basically an interior design icon. He's not only offering up his body to be eaten, but he's like, use my skull, decorate your home.
Which we love.
We love. I know you love because you do have a skull that you like to eat M&Ms out of, so.
Yeah, it is plastic. It is not a human. I mean, it's a human replica skull. It's plastic, though.
You didn't eat him. You didn't eat the meat off of the thing before you used it as an M&M tray.
No. Well, and it's a her. It's Beatrice.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Beatrice.
Everyone should have a plastic skull that they use as a vessel for M&Ms. It's just fun, you know?
Best candy dish ever. So, in their emails, we're going to go back to our buddies, Armin and Brandis. They are, like we had mentioned, they're exchanging messages talking about, like, how they're going to pull this thing off. So they get extremely detailed with it. So, like, they both know that this is legit. They're not just role-playing anymore at this point. And so they're making plans to meet up and pull this thing off. So Brandis, he had a partner at the time. So he says he's going to lie to his partner that he's going to be at a business event. So he tells Armin that he's going to wipe the evidence from his computer beforehand, and then he was going to come down to meet Armin for the feast, essentially. So they even got as specific in these emails as what they would do with his meat and how Armin would store it and prepare it. And so after all this, it gets pretty gruesome. Like, after all of this thought and preparation, they finally plan to meet in person and have, like, a nice little flesh feast in March of 2001. So really this moved pretty quickly because they met online in February and then they went through all of this, like, emailing back and forth to finally meeting up in March. So only about a month. And then they're like, pull the trigger, let's do this thing. So obviously they decide they're going to meet at Armin's home because he has constructed a room specifically for the purpose of butchering willing participants. And so Brandis buys a one-way ticket to Armin's home from Berlin, and so it's like game on at this point. It's about to happen. When they arrive at Armin's house, at first Brandis does change his mind. So they leave the home and they start to drive Brandis back to the train to go back to Berlin. However, at some point during the drive, he gets scared of having to explain himself to his partner about where he was and what the intentions for him going were. So he actually talks himself back into being eaten. And yeah, so he would rather, instead of confessing to his partner that he was on cannibal websites wanting to be eaten, he would rather just be like, he's like, no, like, that's too embarrassing. That's too much for me. Just let's do it. Like, at this point, there's no turning back.
I feel like he could have just been like, look, I was going to meet up with somebody for something and I just, you know, like, he didn't necessarily have to go all the way into it. But
right.
I can kind of understand his mindset at the same time.
And like I said earlier too, like, he was depressed already, so, like, for him to have to come clean about pretty much having an affair because there was a big sexual undertone to this, he's like, I can't, you know, I just don't want to face the music on that. And he already had those suicidal ideations, I'm assuming, because he wanted to off himself, just not like DIY. He wanted someone else to do it.
Yeah.
So I could kind of see, like, why he'd be like, I can't, this is too much to explain. Let's just go back and do the damn thing.
Yeah, like, I can see that, but at the same time, it's like, dude, this isn't the end all be all.
Yeah. There's options. You could just say I was having an affair and, like, just leave it at that. But anyway, so they turn around, they go back to Armin's house, and when they get there this time, Armin's like, let's record this. Let's videotape this whole thing, which is actually how we have so much detail for this story, because literally all of this is on videotape. And I bet if you went on the dark web, you could probably find it somewhere. It's never been officially released to the public, obviously, because it's, like, very dark and there's a person being murdered. But they did actually show the footage in the trial. So it's definitely there. It exists. So they set up the camera, and in order to cope with what's about to happen, Brandes takes half a bottle of cold medication, and he drinks enough schnapps in order to dull the pain while Armin butchers him. And now, Ashlee, this is the time where you can get out the little treats I sent you. We have a sensory experience for the next part of this. And would you mind telling them what you have here?
Super fun penis candy.
Okay.
They're colorful, delightful little sugar bits.
So while Ashlee enjoys her sensory experience here, I'm going to get on to the next portion of the story. So Brandes says to Armin, when I'm sleeping, you can castrate me. And one thing to note from their prior exchanges is that when Brandes had a wish, or is that he did have a wish that he would be able to remove his own penis and eat it. So as you have a mouthful of dicks, we're going to just go through this story. So he insisted that Armin would bite his penis off. However, he was able to accomplish his task because obviously he's a human. He doesn't have wolf teeth. So instead they turned to using a knife. However, the knife that he first chooses turns out to be too blunt. And finally, he goes to bowl porridge number 3 and finds a sharp enough knife. And he is able to slice off his pee-pee.
What the actual fuck?
Yep. So both men are still alive, and as we had mentioned before, Brandes wanted to eat his penis, but he wanted to eat it raw. So unfortunately for him, they couldn't eat it because it was too tough and, as he put it, chewy. So to be the polite cannibal that he is, Armin then decides he's going to saute it up in a pan with salt, pepper, and garlic. Unfortunately for Armin, it didn't taste as good as he had imagined.
Well, so just having a knowledge of, like, butchery and animals, having grown up on a farm, you don't want to eat the dick. It's vascular. It's not
just like
be
spongy tissue. Yeah.
It's not gonna be a good piece of meat. Like, if you're gonna, I get the whole, like, shock value, I guess, of it, but yeah, that's like the least part. Also, like, when you butcher animals, and I'm sorry to any, like, vegetarians or vegans out there, but, like, when you butcher animals, like, you butcher them when they're young, fairly young. So, like, a 20, 30-year-old dude is not gonna be good eatins. Like, you're gonna theoretically, not that I would or have ever eaten a person, if you were going to eat an older person, you would need to make it a stew or like a slow cook, pressure cook kind of situation, because that meat is just going to be too tough.
Well, and I'll let you know, we will kind of get into that a little bit, how Armin, our buddy here, decides is the best way to prepare this meat. So jumping back into our story here, we are meeting back up with Armin and Brandes. They had just attempted to eat his penis and decided it was too chewy. So at this point, obviously, Brandes is slowly bleeding out because he has had his penis severed. And so he says to Armin that he wants to be placed in the bath so that he can pass away more peacefully and so that the blood doesn't fucking go everywhere. So Armin draws a bath for him. He places him in there, and Armin checks on him every 15 minutes or so. So you might be asking yourself, what is Armin doing between his check-ins? He is actually a man of high-class literature. He's reading a Star Trek novel. So as Brandes is in the bathtub bleeding out, Armin is videotaping himself and Brandis, but he is reading a Star Trek novel while he's just like waiting it out here. To the shock and surprise of absolutely no one, things just don't end up this neatly. Like, this isn't where we put the shiny bow on the package here and end our story. So about 2 hours after he's put in the bath, Brandis is still alive. How is he still alive? He gets out of the bath, and obviously he's weakened at this point, so he falls down. Armin then decides to carry him to the bed, and he tucks him in, and Brandis tells him that if he's still alive in the morning, we can feast on my penis. Now, I'm just going to insert my own assumptions here, and Armin obviously did not like the taste of the pee-pee. It was not a good cut of meat to him, and he's like, I don't want to eat that again. So, unfortunately, around 5 a.m. that morning, Armin stabs him to death instead, so that they don't have to eat the rest of the penis.
He's like, fuck this noise.
Yep. So, again, keep in mind, we're still recording all of this. So Armin then hangs the body on a meat hook, and he begins to prepare it for eating. And he kept the tape and watched it repeatedly, as I imagine he has some sort of sexual fetish about it. Honestly, still better than watching child porn, in my opinion. After Armin has carved up the meat, he decides that he's going to pulverize the bones to get rid of that evidence, but he did keep the head, and over the next few days, he begins to eat Brandis's meat. So his first meal that he prepares is a piece of rump steak from his backside, so his butt. And it was a special occasion for Armin. So he lays out candles, he gets out his good dinnerware and wine, and he ate it with potatoes and sprouts. So he made himself a nice big meal out of it, and he referred to the taste as like pork, but stronger and more substantial. Armin, like I said, we're going to get into his opinion on this human meat. He found it to be too chewy. So instead of eating it as steaks like he did at first, he turns all the meat into mince and basically makes meatballs out of Brandis. So over the next year, Armin consumes 45 pounds of meat from Brandis's body.
Wait, this is over like a few years?
I think the entire saga from meeting this guy to the end of his tale here is over the course of 2 years.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Also, so if he made the meat into mince, do you think he made a manwich?
Oh my god, yes. He definitely made many manwiches out of this. I hope, oh my god, if he didn't, what a missed opportunity.
It's like, if you're going to be a cannibal, then at least take the joke.
Now, if we ever have someone from Germany listening, please chime in and let us know, is there manwich sauce available in Germany? So, like, Sloppy Joe. I know that that's probably something German people would have to Google, but just let us know. Is there manwich available in Germany?
I feel like there's probably a version of it.
Yeah.
Some sort of version. Like, I mean, mincemeat is pretty, common across culture in Europe.
Yeah.
But let us know.
Yeah, chime in, please. So meanwhile, as this is all happening, obviously Armin, he has at this point gotten away with it. He's enjoying his flesh feast, 45 pounds worth. And immediately after the partner, remember Brandis, he did have a partner. So his partner in Berlin is trying to find him. But unfortunately, per Brandis's emails with Armin, he was incredibly careful to cover his tracks and destroy the evidence. And ultimately, it's not his partner's concern that gets Armin caught. It ends up being Armin's appetite for flesh. So he is not satisfied with just having one victim. He wants more. He demands it. And by June of that year, so just a few months after the initial event, he is back to the internet and he's looking for his next victim, not only posting ads for his next participant, but he's actually posting photos of what he had done to Brandis. So a little bit of a humble brag there on the cannibal websites, I'm assuming.
It was probably like, look at all you bitches just role playing.
Yeah.
I actually did it.
I wonder if the people on those websites like could tell that it was actually human flesh, or they thought he was just like, I don't know, setting a scene with like cow meat or something.
I'm sure that he probably, because he's just so ridiculous. Sounds like he probably went just like all out and was like, this is me actually cutting the meat from this man's buttocks.
Yeah. Yeah, so finally in July of 2002, there's a 23-year-old medical student, and he is on these Cannibal Cafe websites, and he discovers one of Armin's ads and decides to reach out to him looking for more information. So thinking he's found his next victim, he starts messaging back and forth with this medical student. The student is immediately like, this is kind of sus. So he just keeps engaging in conversation with Armin and eventually gets enough details about what he had done with Brandes and his intentions, and he forwards these concerns along to the police. So thankfully, he's going to become the new hero of the story, I think. So this is the beginning of where Armin starts to be brought to justice. And so in November of that year, the police get a warrant to search his home and find where Brandes' remains were. Now, Armin had put them in the freezer, in a deep freeze, but he had like constructed sort of a false bottom to the freezer. So Brandes' meat was like in the bottom of the freezer under this false bottom. And they also find the videotape of the events that had happened that night. So all in all, they are able to determine that Armin has consumed about 1/3 of Brandes' total body. So again, he pulverized a lot of the bones, so I don't know like how much meat he had started with. We know that he consumed 45 pounds of meat. I don't know how much was left. 1 year later, Armin goes to trial and he pleads guilty to assisted suicide. He is actually eventually convicted of manslaughter, and then he's sentenced to only 8.5 years in prison. Obviously, this case attracts media attention, and it leads to a debate over whether Armin should be convicted at all, given that Brandes had volunteered knowingly to participate in this act. So in 2005, so he's been in prison for a few years at this point, a German court actually orders a retrial after prosecutors decide they want to appeal his sentence. They believed that he should not have been convicted of murder. The opposition believes that instead of manslaughter, he should have been convicted of murder. So he is retried and given a life sentence ultimately for murder instead of manslaughter. The appeal didn't work well for Mr. Armin here. Among the questions that the court answered is whether Brandes had actually agreed to his killing or whether he was even legally capable to do so at the moment of the killing. So taking into account both his mental state at the time as well as he had obviously taken a lot of drugs and had a lot of alcohol. So they are unconvinced that he was able to actually willingly consent to this. And I think that is all compounded with the fact that he had initially decided, maybe I shouldn't do this, but just based off the guilt of not wanting to upset his partner, decides it's his only option. So all of that considered, he is eventually, convicted, like I said, of murder. And it was determined basically that he had killed Brandes not out of compassion, but to satiate his own desires, and not because Brandes had asked him. This is something Armin just totally denies through the whole thing, but I think it's pretty clear here that he had a sexual fetish that he was acting on.
Yeah.
In my opinion. I mean, everyone can feel free to weigh in here whether or not they think Brandes actually wanted to die, but I don't think he did. I think he had mental problems that he should have gone to therapy for.
Well, and for him to be like, I don't want to do this, let's, take me back to the train station, and then just to get and then it's kind of like the position of, you're in a strange place with a strange person, and who knows what Brandes was thinking, and who knows what's the other dude's name again?
Armin.
Who knows what he's telling him, saying to him, and being like, oh, well, you can't go back now, basically just pressuring him into it under duress.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. They had videotaped the events after they got back to the home the second time, so we don't know the conversation that happened in the car, whether Armin talked him back into it and basically manipulated him into this act, or if Brandes actually wanted this to happen. Basically, at the trial, even a psychologist states that Armin is at a very high risk for reoffending and still has fantasies about devouring the flesh of young people. So all this, compounds together in, like I had mentioned, life imprisonment for murder. The aftermath of this, according to a report in 2007, Armin actually starts from prison helping investigators in an analysis of two murders, cannibalistic murders, in which two boys are found like horribly mutilated. So Armin kind of like, he obviously is a cannibal and did very bad things, but he takes his life in prison and he like does a lot of interviews and he helps out the police with these cases to kind of like get a profile of the kind of person that would do this.
Kind of like actually, Edmund Kemper.
Yeah, and actually, and I find this the irony of the century. Upon entering prison, Armin becomes a vegetarian. So,
okay, do you think that's because he's like, oh man, I ate a person and, you know, now I need to become a vegetarian because, like, you know, I can't eat meat anymore? Or do you think it's because he's like, wow, that person was so delicious that I could never eat any other type of meat again?
That's what I'm leaning more towards, is that he just, like, has had the pinnacle of meat eating experience and he's like, I can never top that, so why even try?
Yeah.
That's my opinion. But yeah, so he goes to prison, becomes a vegetarian, and works in the prison library, and joins a prisoners group that stands for Green Party politics. So he basically goes to prison and he's like a model prisoner, kumbaya peace man, helping the police find cannibals. Armin actually also rejects like several substantial offers from film companies and publishers that are trying to bring his story to either novels or to TV, and has instead assigned the global rights to his story to a company at no charge on the condition that it gives an accurate account of his case. So he freely gives up his story to a German publishing and production company, just hoping that they accurately portray the case. So that's kind of the story. He is still alive, still in prison. And if you go on YouTube, there's actually several interviews that he gives from prison kind of detailing the accounts here. So he does seem like he has a little bit of guilt over it. But again, it's kind of hard to tell with people like this if it's actual guilt or if it's him trying to pander to the media. So yeah, that was kind of a quick story for this week, which is probably a good thing, but
we're gonna go ahead and round it up. We're gonna do our weekly tarot card reading. Once again, I'm not a psychic professional. I am not Miss Cleo. We're just gonna go off of what the cards tell us.
I get very excited for these every week.
Yeah. So this one's a pretty quick one this week. We pulled the Nine of Wands upright. And that is basically just like persistence, like determination, like you're holding on in here, like you got your shit ready, you're just holding out, like this guy's in his little stick fort. You're gonna have like some kind of like someone's lying to you, there's some kind of betrayal, like somebody's in here, they got these secrets, they're holding them away from you, but you're kind of like prepared, you have all the tools you need, because the magician means like you've got all your tools to kind of like see through their bullshit. And like the magician is like the not quite like truth, but he like he's the master of all the elements, he's master of like the spiritual and the physical, like he knows what's up. So like someone might try to deceive you this week, but you're gonna know, like you're gonna know right away. So I think that's pretty straightforward. Maybe we'll just do one more card to see. Ten of Wands. So Ten of Wands is like a burden, or it can be an accomplishment. It kind of seems like this is like, you're just going to be like, dude, I know what you're doing. I'm going to kind of maybe ignore that. Like, or maybe you might call them out on it. But it's really annoying to you. So because of that, you might have like a new beginning. It might be like, it doesn't seem like a breakup or like you're going to be fired or anything. It just seems like this is a pretty minor thing that's going to happen. But because of that person trying to be like deceptive to you, like you're going to call them out and you're going to have like kind of a new beginning or like prosperity. This is a good card. Obviously, it's very pretty. Very shiny.
It is very pretty.
One more. Two of Swords. So you're going to be prosperous, but you're also going to be kind of like a victim of circumstance. This is a victim of circumstance. This is feeling overwhelmed. This is like maybe being scared of what's going to happen, but let's just do one more because that's not. But this is like recovery. So Ten of Swords is like someone's backstabbing you, but this is the opposite of that. This is like, there's hope, you're gonna recover from it, like this is all gonna end up well. So basically the cards are just telling you like someone's gonna fuck with you, it's maybe not gonna be a good situation, but you're gonna recover just fine from it, and you're gonna get some kind of prosperity out of it. Or, you know, it seems like it's kind of like a work thing maybe. So if you're at work, be like, okay, well, this person fucked up, this person lied to me, I called him out on it, so, you know, this is going to be better for me in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a good one.
All right. Well, I think that's just about it for this episode. We had our experience with our candles, with our bag of dicks, and our manwiches. Everybody have a good week. Stay
and follow
safe.
us on our socials.
Yeah, our socials are below / at the end. If you're on YouTube at the end of the episode,
it'll be in the description.
You can see Beatrice's skull on Instagram, so you better go follow to see Beatrice.
You can see the making of my chaotic Red Bull drink this morning.
Yeah.
We're going to start being good, I think, about posting content there, and follow us on TikTok because we've got some stuff in the works for that as well. So that kind of sums it up for me.
Yeah, sums it up for me. All right, everybody, stay safe and have a great week. Bye.